I always imagined that when my son found someone to marry, I would feel nothing but pride and happiness. After all, he is my only son, and I have always dreamed of the day he would find the right woman. But nothing prepared me for what I felt when I met Emily, the woman he had chosen to be his wife. We met at a Sunday brunch, a tradition in our family. Michael had talked a lot about Emily, and I was eager to meet her. When she walked through the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. She was charming in a way I couldn't quite define. There was a softness to her movements, a natural grace that effortlessly caught your attention. And then there was that smell, a soft perfume that made me think of flowers, something delicate and sweet that filled the room. For the first few minutes, I watched as Michael introduced her to everyone. She smiled warmly, chatted easily, and it was impossible not to notice how polite and kind she was. But what really caught me by surprise was how drawn I was to her from the moment we greeted each other. When our hands touched, I felt a chill that left me disconcerted. "Nice to meet you, sir," she said with that smile that seemed to light up the entire room. And as we sat down for lunch, all I could think about was how something so unexpected could happen. During lunch, I tried to maintain my composure, but every time Emily spoke, every time she laughed, I felt a growing uneasiness inside me. The way she looked at Michael, the tenderness in her gestures, all of this only made the situation even more complicated. I knew it was wrong, that these feelings shouldn't be there, but it was impossible to ignore the strength of the attraction she exerted on me. When lunch was over and she said goodbye, the scent of flowers seemed to linger in the air like a reminder of what I couldn't have. And it was at that moment that I realized that my life had suddenly become much more complicated. A few weeks after that Sunday lunch, we had a dinner with mutual friends. It was an informal gathering, an opportunity for everyone to get to know each other better. When Michael mentioned that he was bringing Emily, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I knew it would happen again, and part of me was afraid of how I would react. Dinner started out lively, with everyone chatting and laughing, but it was during a lull in the evening, while Michael was busy with other friends, that Emily and I started talking. She sat down next to me, her soft floral scent filling the air, and what started as a casual conversation soon turned into something deeper. We talked about everything from the country's political situation to the nuances of classical literature. With every word, I found myself becoming more and more captivated by her maturity and intelligence. Emily was not only beautiful, she was incredibly insightful, with a worldview that surprised me for someone her age. The way she articulated her opinions with quiet confidence showed a depth I had not expected. As she spoke, I found myself completely absorbed in every detail. The movement of her lips, the light reflecting in her eyes, the softness of her voice. Emily was undoubtedly incredibly beautiful, but it was the combination of her beauty with her intelligence and maturity that truly captivated me. It was rare to meet someone so young with such clarity of thought and such a magnetic presence. As the evening wore on, I found myself wishing the conversation would never end. Every minute spent with her seemed to awaken something inside me that I had not known still existed. And although I knew it was wrong, I couldn't help but feel a growing desire to know more about her, to understand what else was behind this woman who was about to marry my son. The night had been intense, full of unexpected conversations and emotions. When dinner was over, I said goodbye to my friends and started my way back home, my head still full of thoughts about Emily. Every word she said, every smile, seemed to be etched in my mind, and I wondered how to deal with the conflicting feelings that were beginning to arise within me. As I was driving, my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw that it was Michael. I answered it quickly, trying to ignore the feeling of unease that was taking hold of me. "Dad, are you going home?" he asked in a slightly slurred voice. "Yes, I am." "Are you okay, son?" I replied, realizing that something was out of the ordinary. "Yes, but I ended up drinking a little more than I should have, and I'm going straight home. Could you do me a favor?" "Sure. What do you need?" "Could you please take Emily home? I've already called a car for myself, but I don't want her to go alone." There was a momentary silence as I absorbed the request. My heart raced, and for a moment I considered refusing. I knew that being alone with Emily after everything that had happened that night would be a test of my willpower. But at the same time, there was no way I could say no. "No problem, son. I'll take care of it," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. Michael thanked me and hung up, leaving me alone with my turbulent thoughts. I drove back to the restaurant where Emily was waiting for me outside, elegantly dressed, with that same soft perfume that always seemed to envelop me. When I saw her, my heart raced again. She smiled at me, a warm, unsuspecting smile, as if the evening had been just another pleasant social gathering. "Michael asked me to drive you home," I explained, trying to sound casual. "Oh, he told me." "Thanks for coming," she said, getting into the car with the same grace that always seemed to accompany her. During the drive, the silence between us was comfortable, but charged with something that didn't need to be said. Every mile we traveled seemed to increase the tension in the air, a tension that we both seemed to recognize, but neither of us wanted to admit. When we finally arrived at her house, Emily turned to me before getting out of the car, and her eyes met mine with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. "Thank you for bringing me. It was a great night," she said, but there was something else in her voice, a softness that made me feel like she knew exactly what was going on between us. "Thank you for the company," I replied, trying to ignore the wave of emotions that was taking over me. She got out of the car, but before she went inside, she turned one last time and gave me a smile that seemed to hold secrets, leaving me with my heart racing and my mind full of forbidden thoughts. As I drove home alone, still stunned by what had happened, I drove back home, trying to gather my thoughts. But before I could calm down, the phone rang again. I looked at the screen, and my heart jumped when I saw Emily's name. I answered with a mix of anxiety and curiosity. "Hi, Emily. Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Her voice was soft, but there was something else in it, a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "Can you come back? I need to talk to you." My heart raced. I knew I shouldn't, but curiosity mixed with desire made me nod. "I'm coming back," I replied, driving quickly, not knowing exactly what to expect. When I got to her house, Emily was already outside, waiting for me. There was something different in her eyes, something that seemed to ask for more than just a conversation. She got into the car, and before I could say anything, her hand slid gently over my legs, slowly moving up. Her touch was enough to break through the fragile barrier I had built. On impulse, I pulled Emily into a kiss that was returned with an intensity that surprised me. There were no more doubts or fears, only the raw desire that had been repressed for so long. Without exchanging a word, I drove to a more secluded spot where we could have some privacy. The car stopped, and before I could process it, Emily was already moving onto my lap, lifting my skirt as her lips sought mine again. The feeling of her moving over me, with desire and strength, was overwhelming. Each movement sent waves of pleasure through my body, making me whisper her name as she took control of the situation. The car seemed too small to contain what was happening, the desire that was overflowing from both of us. I kissed her neck, her shoulders, any part of her that I could reach, while she moved in my lap, each movement more intense than the last. The soft smell of flowers that always accompanied her seemed to mix with the heat of the moment, creating a combination that left me completely lost. Emily moved with a determination that I had never seen before, as if she wanted to extract every drop of pleasure that this moment could offer. And I, completely submissive to what I felt, responded to every touch, every movement, letting myself be carried away by something that I knew was dangerous, but impossible to resist. The moment was as intense as it was unexpected, and when it was finally over, we both knew that we had crossed a line that could not be undone. And as she returned to the seat next to me, with one last look that said everything without needing words, I knew that my life would never be the same after that forbidden encounter in the car. The silence between us was deafening. Emily straightened her clothes, and as I drove her home, neither of us spoke. What we had done hung over us like a shadow, a line that once crossed could not be erased. When I finally dropped her off at home, she gave me one last look full of meaning and regret before getting out of the car. I stood there for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I knew there was no excuse for what we had done, and guilt slowly began to creep in, replacing the desire that had consumed us both. For the next few days, Emily and I avoided all contact. The silence between us was an unspoken agreement, a desperate attempt to pretend nothing had happened. But the weight of what we had done did not disappear. It lodged itself in my chest, becoming a burden that I would carry forever. Michael, unaware of anything, continued with the wedding preparations, full of excitement and love for Emily. And I, her father, was trapped in a web of lies and betrayal that I had woven for myself. The wedding took place a few weeks later. I watched as my son married the woman who had become the source of my greatest guilt. And in that moment, I realized that the price of forbidden desire was too high, and that the consequences of my choices would haunt me for the rest of my life. Emily and I went on with our lives, pretending that that night never happened. But deep down, we both knew the truth, and that truth would follow us forever, like a shadow that never disappears. Did you like this story? If so, leave a comment telling us what you thought, and if you've ever experienced something similar, share it with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any new content. Here, we always bring life stories, reflections, and real experiences, all with great sincerity. Thank you for watching until the end and for being part of this journey. See you in the next video.